Good day, and welcome to Hidden Source News, where we bring you stories from around the world. Today we have a story over an ongoing story that deals with a mysterious location called Skinwalker Ranch. As always, please subscribe to the channel to help us grow and keep bringing in more and more news as we grow. Skinwalker Ranch is a 512-acre property tucked into the high desert of northeastern Utah near Ballard in Uintah County. For decades, it has been tied to reports of UFOs, cattle mutilations, unexplained lights, big anomalous animals, poltergeist-like activity, and a local folk belief in skinwalkers, shape-shifting witches from Native American lore. The ranch entered modern public attention in the mid-1990s and has since become the single most famous United States site associated with high strangeness. The origin story, Shermans, sightings, and the sale. Most public narratives begin with Terry and Gwen Sherman, who owned the property briefly in the 1990s and reported a string of terrifying events. Glowing orbs, mutilated cattle found in bizarre condition, a wolf with piercing red eyes, and other odd encounters. Those accounts were publicized in local reporting and later by investigative journalist George Knapp, which led to Robert Bigelow, a wealthy aerospace entrepreneur, purchasing the ranch in 1996 to fund formal investigations. The Shermans' testimony forms the backbone of the modern legend. Bigelow, N-Ides and the private research era. After buying the property, Robert Bigelow funded the National Institute for Discovery Science, or NIDS, and later associated programs to study the phenomena there. The stated goal was to apply structured scientific tools and monitoring to capture whatever was happening. For years, NIDS personnel conducted observations, interviews, and experiments. The project later evolved through various private entities and databases that tracked anomalous reports. Those private investigations produced internal reports, but concrete peer-reviewed proof has remained elusive. How the Pentagon enters the story. A. Babu W. Sapp, AATIP, and Bass. Skinwalker moved from private obsession to a thread in the broader United States government interest in UAPs, or unidentified anomalous phenomena, when Defense Department funding streams for UAP research ramped up in the 2000s and 2010s. Congressional interest in Department of Defense programs, such as AAWSAP and AATIP, and related contracts, channeled millions to groups and contractors investigating aerial anomalies and occasionally contracted or collaborated with groups connected to Bigelow's research. Public reporting has tied some of that Pentagon money and attention back to work inspired by events like those claimed at Skinwalker Ranch. However, official government releases have not produced smoking gun evidence that validates the thousands of sensational claims tied to the site. What investigators, private and government, actually found and didn't. Investigators logged many anecdotes, multiple witness statements, some low-quality video and photographs, reports of cattle found with surgical-style injuries, and claims of physical effects like electromagnetic interference around vehicles. But despite years of monitoring, teams repeatedly acknowledged difficulty producing robust, repeatable, scientifically verifiable data that would pass peer review. Skeptics point out that the most extraordinary claims often rely on single eyewitness reports, hearsay, or data that can't be independently reproduced. In short, lots of anomalous stories. Little conclusive scientific proof in the public record. The role of government documents and secrecy, what's public and what isn't. There are public records showing congressional interest and allocations, like the now famous roughly $22 million line items and later programs that funded UAP research, and investigative journalists have traced some money and reports that intersect with organizations or people tied to Skinwalker investigations. But much of the most cited government evidence remains ambiguous, compartmentalized, or buried in contractor reports and FOIA-resistant files. That means there's a difference between government interest or action and a clear, declassified, scientifically rigorous account proving anything paranormal at the ranch. Cultural and folklore context, the Skinwalker name, and tribal concerns. Skinwalker is a term rooted in Navajo or Diné oral tradition, Yenaldlushi, denoting a specific kind of harmful witch who can transform into animals. The name carries cultural weight and taboos. The ranch sits in a region bordered by Ute and other indigenous lands, and tribal historians and cultural leaders have often cautioned outsiders about appropriating or sensationalizing sacred, painful, or taboo stories. Responsible reporting notes that the paranormal branding of the land has sometimes ignored cultural context and the wishes of tribal voices. So, since 2016, the ranch has been under new ownership, sold to Brandon Fugel and Adamantium Real Estate LLC. With Fugel at the helm, the property became much more tightly controlled and was transformed into the central set piece for the History Channel's long-running series, The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. This show, presents an ongoing and dramatized version of scientific fieldwork and discovery. The series has definitely popularized the site, attracting new investigators and prompting more public statements from the owners. But, at the same time, it's also blurred the lines between entertainment and strictly objective science for a lot of viewers. The most mysterious episodes, well, these are the things that still baffle investigators. Over the years, people looking into the ranch have described recurring types of anomalies that just defy easy explanation. For instance, sudden structured cattle mutilations that don't show any clear predator pattern, lights and craft in the sky that simply don't behave like conventional aircraft, reports of large animals that seem, somehow, impervious to bullets. And then there are equipment glitches, or these really localized electromagnetic effects. To believers, the sheer cluster of different phenomena at one site hints at something genuinely unusual about the location itself. But, to skeptics, this same cluster looks more like a mix of folklore, confirmation bias, misinterpretation, and, perhaps, a handful of curious but ultimately explainable events. The lack of repeatable, independently validated data is really the core problem for reaching any kind of scientific consensus. When it comes to scientific critique and skeptical takes, here's why so many scientists remain unconvinced. Serious scientists always emphasize methodology, things like repeatability, control, independent verification, and the elimination of alternative explanations. The record at Skinwalker is, honestly, heavy on sensational witness reports and quite light on controlled, replicable experimental evidence. Prominent skeptics and critics have suggested motivations such as financial incentive, misremembering, hoaxing, and cultural amplification. Now, it's important to remember, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. But within the scientific method, the absence of reproducible evidence is exactly why these claims remain unresolved, not proven. So, what has the government actually discovered? Well, officially, government interest in UAPs has led to more transparency overall, including the declassification of certain videos and reports showing anomalous aerial phenomena. Yet, no publicly released Pentagon study or government report has ever confirmed the paranormal narratives attached specifically to Skinwalker Ranch in a way that settles the debate. Government research has shown only that unusual aerial observations do occur and deserve study. It hasn't, in any open public documentation, definitively tied those phenomena to extraterrestrial craft or occult activity on the ranch. Many documents are honestly still redacted or classified, and some contractor reports remain private. That gap is where much of the speculation and controversy really lives. The cultural, scientific, and policy stakes here are significant. This matters for reasons that go well beyond just thrills. Skinwalker Ranch serves as a crucible for several broader issues. How we investigate anomalous claims, how private wealth and government resources can intersect in fringe science, and how media, whether TV or books, can shape public perception. It also raises policy questions about how governments collect and share evidence, especially when it's tied to national security or scientific inquiry. And importantly, the site forces journalists and scientists to wrestle with cultural respect for Indigenous traditions, while also assessing sensational claims. The way Skinwalker is handled has real consequences for credibility, and honestly, for how seriously future anomalous reports are investigated. So, bottom line for the viewer, what should you believe and why? For audiences, the sensible takeaway is layered. The stories are real in the sense that people do report them. The ranch has attracted serious private funding and government interest. But extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And, as of now, publicly released, scientifically conclusive evidence for paranormal explanations at Skinwalker Ranch simply doesn't exist. The site remains a potent mix of eyewitness mystery, active investigation, cultural lore, and media spectacle. It's best to approach it with curiosity, but also with a healthy dose of skepticism and a real respect for the cultural histories involved. If you'd like to keep following this story, the best thing to do is track primary sources. Look for investigative reporting by established outlets, declassified government documents related to UAP programs, and public statements from the ranch's owners and investigators. And, just to wrap up, treat TV dramatizations as entertainment unless they're backed up by data and corroborated reports. And finally, really, ask questions, demand transparency where possible, and remember that mystery can be valuable even when the answer is, we don't know yet. If you like the documentary, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel to help us grow. Have a great day and keep your eyes open to the skies for anything weird.